Sarah saw a glow coming from an area to her right side. She turned toward the light, and saw Ollie's tall form crouched next to Rihanna, her golden hair shining in the night. Thomas, James, Robert, Finola, Alice all sat on the ground next to them. They were all alive but helpless beneath the invisible barrier Ollie had erected around them. Directly in front of her friend stood a boy of medium height with black hair and a very white face. He was very handsome and scary looking at the same time. He was watching the group in the bubble in front of him and laughing. She felt a chill go down her spine. While she watched him, he turned and looked directly at her. His sharp gaze caught hers and he raised his hand and beckoned her to come closer. She moved toward him, unable to stop herself, but was pulled back by a sharp tug from Franklin. He called out a warning. "Sarah, what are you doing? You can't go over there," he cried, as he tried to keep her from going near that creepy dark-haired kid. "He is really bad, I can feel it. Please, Sarah, let's put up a fight here. Don't get too close to him. Maybe we can help the others get to the forest. We'll have cover there. Once we get there, what will we do? Hide," she said sadly. "We came here to stop the Garen, not run away from them. If they gather in full force, we don't stand a chance. I know that kid is trouble. I can feel it too. But I have to go over there, I know I do. Not just because he is trying to force me by crawling into my mind, like he has many times since we started from the Isle of Hope. I think Sholsar is urging me to go over there. So that's where I'm going. Are you going to help me?" She tugged her arm back, rubbing at her wrist where his fingers had left a red mark. She looked back at the dark-haired boy watching them silently with a smirk on his perfect pouty lips and cringed. Her instincts told her that the smartest thing she could do was turn away from him and run as fast as her legs would carry her. But there was something else, an equally strong feeling that meeting him face to face was exactly what she was supposed to do. She looked across the field to where Ollie sat with her friends and found him looking directly at her, as if they shared the very same thought at that moment. As he nodded his head at her, she found her feet moving once again toward the boy. Franklin watched her go. Flicking his arms from side to side, he set fire to every flammable object in the field. Everything was burning, from the grass under the feet of the Garen and Ornos, to each and every tree at the edge of the forest. In fact, the only area not touched by the inferno was the ground where Ollie and the others sat, the path directly in front of Sarah, and the area where the boy stood. Though it was still night, the area glowed as if it were noon. As soon as the thought crossed her mind, she smiled, in spite of her fear. Just like that old movie with Gary Cooper, she was going out to face the enemy at high noon. It would be nice if she was like Gary and won the battle despite the astronomical odds. The smile dropped from her face as she thought about the alternative. He wanted to make her suffer. She knew it. She could feel his hatred oozing out. His cold gaze never wavered. He never even blinked. Sarah continued to walk toward the boy as Garen and Ornos ran screaming around her, batting ineffectively at the flames that turned them into piles of ashes. She felt her stomach tighten up and bile rose in her throat as she got closer and closer to the evil child in front of her. He continued to stare at her, watching every step she took until finally, she found herself standing about 2 feet in front of him. She stopped and stood as straight as she could, trying to convey a confidence she certainly didn't feel. "So we meet at last," the boy said in a voice so beautiful that for a moment she just wanted to stand and listen. He could have said anything at all. It didn't matter, she would have done whatever he asked. His voice was so mesmerizing. But that brief moment didn't last. She took a good long look at this object of perfection as he stood preening before her. He was gorgeous with his lovely pale complexion and curly black hair that would have made many a young girl stare googly-eyed in admiration. His pearly white teeth glowed in the bright lights that flickered all around them. Bright green eyes gleamed as he watched her studying his fine form, satisfied that she was suitably impressed with what she saw. Her eyes closed for an instant, and when she opened them, it was as if she were looking at a different person altogether. It was as if she was seeing him from the inside out, looking deep into his soul, and his soul was a very ugly thing to behold. The beautifully sculpted face was now shriveled and pitted, with worms crawling from his rotting skin. His teeth were crooked and yellow with a thin, forked tongue that flicked out as he breathed. Those lovely cupid bow lips were rotted pieces of flesh flapping loosely from his face. His hair hung about his head like pieces of dirty black yarn, and a foul odor hung about his gangly skeletal frame. She gagged and quickly plugged her nose, unwilling to breathe in the stench a second longer. It was an instinctive act on her part. She hadn't meant to mock him by doing it. It was just that he smelled so darn bad, she couldn't help it. "Who are you?" she asked with her fingers still holding fast to her nostrils. Her words sounded strange, almost comical, with her nose all pinched together. He was scary all right, but truly, all she could think of at this moment was how bad he stunk.